All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. The source material today is, well, it's incredibly ambitious. It actually attempts to cover all of biology in just 17 minutes. So we're going to try to capture that exact same rapid-fire spirit right here. We are taking a seriously awe-inspiring journey, literally starting from a flaming rock in space, zooming all the way down into the microscopic machinery of a single cell, and then pulling back out to look at the complex electrical storms inside your own brain. It's a massive amount of ground to cover, but I promise you, it is going to be absolutely fascinating.
But, before we can really understand the heavy stuff, like how human organ systems work or what's happening in our brains, we actually need to start at the very beginning. We have to ask ourselves, how did we even get here? And at a fundamental level, what actually separates a living, breathing cat from a totally inanimate rock?
So picture this. About 4.5 billion years ago, Earth was essentially just this giant, heavily bombarded ball of flaming rock in space. But as it slowly cooled down, the water that was trapped inside those rocks turned into steam, rained back down, and literally flooded the entire planet. And down at the very bottom of those newly formed oceans, hiding inside these piping hot, chemical-rich hydrothermal vents, some really interesting stuff started to happen. Basically, the chemical reactions bubbling down there laid the ultimate groundwork for everything that we now call life. Which brings us to Section 1, Origins and Building Blocks. Basically, the chemistry of life. So, biology is officially defined as the study of life. But as our source material points out, it is really just chemistry in disguise. When you think about it, you, me, your cat, the trees outside, we are all essentially just these massive, incredibly organized collections of molecules. Molecules that have somehow figured out how to metabolize energy, grow, reproduce, and, well, in our case, make funny little sounds to communicate with one another.
And what's crazy is just how simple the ingredient list actually is. There are basically just 4 biomolecules that act as the ultimate Lego bricks for building life. You've got carbohydrates, which give you quick energy, lipids, which are for long-term energy storage and making cell membranes, proteins, which literally build your tissues, and nucleic acids, which make up your DNA. Oh, and within those proteins, you have special ones called enzymes. Think of enzymes as biological catalysts. They literally speed up all the vital chemical reactions happening inside you. Honestly, without them, life just flat out wouldn't work.
Now, using those biological Lego bricks, life eventually organized itself into cells. But there is a massive divide in the cellular world. On one hand, you have prokaryotes, think bacteria and archaea. These are super simple, single-celled organisms, and their DNA is just kind of chilling, freely floating around inside. But on the other hand, we have eukaryotes. These are the fancy cells. They make up complex organisms like plants, animals, and us. Eukaryotes keep everything meticulously organized inside specialized, membrane-bound compartments called organelles. Like, for example, the nucleus. But here's the thing. Whether you're a basic bacteria or a highly complex human, every living thing has to maintain homeostasis. For us, that means sweating when we get too hot, right? But for a single microscopic cell, it's all about balancing chemical concentrations and pH levels so those crucial enzymes we talked about don't just break down. And this whole delicate balancing act, it is entirely managed by the cell membrane. It acts exactly like a bouncer at a club. It decides what tiny molecules can easily slip in through diffusion and what larger stuff gets locked out or needs to use special channels. Actually, quick biology pro tip from our source here. That diffusion process is exactly why you should never drink salt water. The high salt concentration outside your cells will literally draw the water out from inside them and severely dehydrate you.
Of course, to do all this cellular work, moving particles around, keeping you alive, you need energy, which brings us to cellular respiration. So your cells take glucose, which you get just from eating, or if you're a plant, from staring at the sun during photosynthesis, and they combine it with oxygen inside an organelle called the mitochondria. This chemical process breaks highly energetic bonds to produce water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. And ATP is the absolute holy grail. It is the universal chemical fuel for all of life.
Okay, Section 2, the instruction manual. We're going inside the nucleus.
So, that instruction manual is written in DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. You've probably seen it. It's that beautifully twisted double helix made of nucleotides. But the really crucial part here is the nitrogenous bases that make up the rungs of that twisted ladder. It operates as a super strict matching game. Adenine always pairs with thymine, and cytosine always pairs with guanine, A to T, C to G. This simple four-letter alphabet stores literally all of your genetic information, and long, specific sections of these base pairs are what we call genes. They act as literal biological recipes for making the proteins that dictate your traits, like, say, the exact amount of melanin in your eyes.
But there's a huge logistical problem here. Your DNA is heavily guarded. It's permanently locked inside the nucleus. But the proteins? Those are manufactured way out in the main part of the cell at organelles called ribosomes. So to solve this, the cell uses this brilliant four-step courier system. Step 1, transcription. An enzyme literally copies the DNA recipe into a single strand of messenger RNA, or mRNA. Step 2, that mRNA carries the message out of the nucleus and over to a ribosome. Step 3, translation. Transfer RNA starts matching specific amino acids to every three-letter sequence, called a codon, on that mRNA. And finally, step 4, all those amino acids link together into a long chain that folds into a functioning protein. And boom, that is exactly how abstract code physically becomes a part of you.
Moving right along to Section 3, genetics and inheritance, how we pass traits down. So inside your nucleus, your DNA is super tightly coiled up into structures known as chromosomes. You get 23 of these from your mom and 23 from your dad. Because of this, you actually have two versions of most genes, which are called alleles. Let's look at eye color to see how dominant and recessive alleles play out. Brown is a dominant allele, we'll call it capital B, and blue is recessive, lowercase b. Here's where it gets wild. If two parents both have brown eyes, they might still secretly harbor a hidden recessive blue allele in their genotype. And since offspring inherit one random allele from each parent, there is a mathematical chance that two brown-eyed parents could pass down both of those recessive alleles, giving them a blue-eyed child. It really is proof that it's what's on the inside that counts.
Now, to actually pass those genes on, or even just to let you grow, your cells have to divide. And they do this in two vastly different ways. Mitosis is basically the standard operating procedure. A cell replicates its DNA and simply splits into two perfectly identical copies. This is how you heal a scraped knee, or how you grow taller. Meiosis, on the other hand, is exclusively for reproduction. It creates sperm and egg cells by literally crossing over and mixing up your genetic information, resulting in totally unique cells that only have half the usual number of chromosomes. That way, when a sperm and egg finally combine, the resulting human gets the perfect full set.
But most of a cell's life is actually just spent chilling out in a phase called interphase. It's just growing and constantly checking its own health through these strict protein checkpoints. But if those checkpoints break down or get ignored, a cell can start replicating totally out of control, which is exactly what we call cancer. On top of that, the genetic copying process just isn't always perfect. Sometimes a single changed letter in the DNA sequence can alter a totally vital protein. Or, looking at a larger scale, entire sections of chromosomes can accidentally be duplicated or deleted. For instance, having an extra copy of the 21st chromosome is what results in Down syndrome.
All right, Section 4, Evolution and the Microbes. Survival of the fittest.
So it's important to remember that these microscopic mutations aren't always a bad thing. In fact, they are the absolute engine of natural selection. Just imagine a population of yellow grasshoppers. One day, a random mutation happens and a grasshopper is born green. Suddenly, it blends perfectly into the grass, right? It doesn't get eaten by birds, which means it survives longer and has way more offspring. Over time, that green trait becomes the dominant one in the whole population. That is evolution in real time. The organisms that are best adapted to their environment are the ones that survive to pass down their traits.
And this constant, relentless adaptation? That's exactly why we are currently in an evolutionary arms race with microbes. Take bacteria, for example. They are living, single-celled prokaryotes. We can usually treat bacterial infections with antibiotics, but thanks to natural selection, they are constantly mutating to become resistant to those exact drugs. And then, on the other hand, we have viruses. Viruses are just completely bizarre. They aren't even made of cells, they physically cannot reproduce without hijacking a host, and scientists aren't even completely sure if they qualify as being alive. Because they're fundamentally so different, antibiotics do absolutely zero to them. You basically just have to rely on your own immune system adapting to fight them off. Finally, Section 5, the nervous system. The electrical signals making it all happen.
So your nervous system is made up of these highly specialized cells called neurons. Now, when a neuron in your brain is just at rest, just hanging out, not doing much, it maintains a very specific imbalance of ions inside versus outside the cell. And this chemical gradient creates a literal, measurable electric potential of exactly -70 millivolts. I mean, your brain is quite literally electric.
But if a stimulus comes along, like, say, touching a hot stove, or even just hearing the sound of my voice right now, and it pushes that electrical charge just slightly more positive, hitting a super strict threshold of negative 55 millivolts, it triggers a massive all-or-nothing chain reaction.
The second that threshold is hit, it triggers what's called an action potential. Ion channels fly open, ions rush in, and the electrical charge briefly flips in this process called depolarization. This electric signal then rockets down the neuron's axon, sometimes even jumping rapidly across these special gaps called nodes of Ranvier so it can travel even faster. And when it reaches the very end of the cell, it forces the release of chemical neurotransmitters across a tiny gap, called a synapse, to trigger the exact same electric spike in the very next neuron. Think about this. Every single thing you see, think, and feel is just this exact same electrical signal firing at the exact same strength and speed. The only difference between feeling a gentle breeze on your face and feeling intense pain is simply where that signal is happening in your brain and how frequently it's firing.
Which actually brings us to the end of our rapid-fire journey, and it leaves us with a truly wild thought to ponder. I mean, we started with a flaming rock that cooled into oceans where simple chemicals just happened to react. We've seen how molecules formed cells, how DNA codes for proteins, and how mutations drive evolution. And now we see that even our very highest levels of consciousness, our deepest thoughts, our feelings, our very ability to sit here and learn biology, are fundamentally just electrical action potentials and chemical gradients shifting back and forth. And really begs the question, if 4.5 billion years of evolution has scaled up from simple water diffusion to the complex electrical storms inside our brains, what exactly is the absolute limit of this incredibly elaborate, beautiful chemical disguise that we call life? Definitely something to think about next time you look in the mirror.